Good morning, good evening, good night, whenever you are tuning into the Blackout Live from New York. So excited to be back here with you guys today. The Blackout Live from New York with me, your host, Tasemere's purpose is to celebrate Black folks across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, how we reimagine trends in business, and explore the magic that we have. We have a reoccurring guest, Miss Kenyatta S. Rose, and I wanted to talk about AI this morning.
Well, it'll be mostly you talking because I'm new to this space and I'm just following it. But I think it's going to be an interesting question nonetheless.
Yeah,
I see your
well,
pregnancy glow, by the way, too.
oh, yes, it won't be here for much longer, but yes, we will get the glow on. So AI has been something that I think we all have been exploring in some way, form, and fashion, whether it's through like movies like Star Trek or Marvel movies really have a lot of artificial intelligence. Robot, which we text about yesterday, has a lot of artificial intelligence and things like that. But we are now seeing it happen in our dimension and time, not just on like a movie screen, right? So Amazon is thinking about some artificial intelligence where you can not even have to go scan your uh, merchandise at a register. You kind of like scan it with your phone and it deducts it from your bank account. In New York City, we have some technology where you no longer need to use a Metro card to actually get on the train or the bus. You can just tap your debit card or your phone. And some most people have experienced those chat bots on the side when they go to different websites. So I think we are engaging with artificial intelligence um, devices or technology without really knowing it. And I saw something on a news channel that said AI was going to be part of how we work in the workforce. Like they are thinking through AI and actual robots to take over certain jobs, but then people will have to manage that bot or something like that. So the example that they gave was in manufacturing when you think about Detroit and like making a car. So there's some things on the assembly line that maybe a robot will be able to do, but then a human person or persons will be managing that robot. So I think it's interesting what is happening now. But I wanted to bring up this article that I found that I thought took it a step further, where they were talking about something that I've only have seen in movies where they are trying to bring zombies, in my opinion. German doctors are attempting to reverse death and resurrect humans. And so they have um, some folks that have already signed up for this, right, experiment where they are saying that they would like to preserve their bodies to be resurrected back in this dimension and time at another time. That's basically what this article is saying.
Yeah. What was the term?
What do you think?
Am I echoing?
No.
Am I echoing? I sound clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was the term for it? Was it cryptogenesis? What was the term?
Yeah, it's something like
Cryogenesis?
that. Like they're trying to do this whole like Christ-like controlled death kind of thing where you die, but you don't really die because you can come back to life.
Well, I'm gonna go back to the AI conversation first. Um, and well, I'll answer that question. What do I think about the whole zombie bringing back people? I think isn't it clear that that's always been their intention, right? Like,
Yes.
isn't that clear that that was where it was always headed? Me personally, I don't have any intentions of coming back. Like once I'm done with this life, it's like if reincarnation is real, and I suspect that it is, I would like to move on to the next one. And I want a different gender. I want, I might come back as a squirrel. It gotta, it depends. I'm not even sure if I want to come back to the States. It depends on where we are, with a lot of like social justice issues. So, I think it's inevitable. I think that they've shown us that is where they were always going to go there. Um, I think that there are no limits on what man can do. I know that, so I'm gonna bring religion into the conversation if you're okay with that. I know that, and I was indoctrinated with Christianity, so I'll give a Christian perspective. I know that with regards to Christianity, we've constantly been taught that there is this sort of silent battle between man and God. And when I think about that, I think about the Tower of Babel, where man tried to build a tower that went up to the sky, the heavens. And in the story, God says, okay, whatever they put their mind to, they can achieve. So I'm going to make them speak different languages. And when I think about that story and I think about where we're headed and what we have accomplished as the human race, that story to me is no longer relevant because we're going to keep pushing the envelope. It's going to be bringing people back to life. And I think they will achieve it. Will they achieve it in this lifetime? I don't think so. I don't think that I will be alive to see it, but I think that they will achieve it. So whatever these men and women, I'm sure there's some women involved, whatever they put their mind to, I'm confident that they will achieve it. Like if it's bringing people back to life, what haven't we attempted to do that we haven't achieved?
I
I'm
mean,
not sure.
as
a
like
race, as the human race, what
as like humans, I'm not sure. I think that one of the things that I did also run across, and I don't know if it was an article or if it was like a monologue from someone, but what I did run across was someone said that movies and fiction help to set the stage to get you, I guess, accustomed to this maybe being part of your reality. So
they
if
want us to believe that it's inevitable.
yeah, if you always like you're watching movies, and if in certain movies that you're watching, people are coming back to life, or people have a chip in their head, or people are, building things out of nothingness, right? If that becomes part of your actual lived experience, it's not as shocking because you've seen it happen in film or on television, or you've read it in books, or wherever you absorb like entertainment, you've seen it before. So it's not so foreign as if like you've never had an interaction with this stuff, and then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, we're gonna bring people back from the dead.
I mean, yeah, like, and to that point, it's possible that they don't even have the technology, right? They could just be putting this news out just to say this is inevitable. And I'll give you a good example. This woman, I don't remember her name, but she speaks a lot on like AI, parallel universes, just like the otherly kind of topics. And she brought up a really good point. She said a lot of times what these people are doing when they want you to, like you just said, adapt to something, they, even if it's not already being done, they will present it to you as, listen, this is inevitable. And when she used a really good example about Netflix. A couple weeks ago, Netflix was putting out the news that they were going to start doing ads on Netflix. And when they put the news out, they put it out as though, listen, we're going to put the ads out. It's inevitable. You will accept it. Well, naturally, it didn't work, right? People balked at the idea. I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to roll it out again, but they're going to come and do it probably in a different manner, but they will do it. But it was the way in which they put that news out. Like, we are going to roll out these ads, whether you like it or not. And when I think about that, about how they always present things as though it's inevitable, it made me start to think about, question everything that I see in the news. Like, it's very well possible that they may not even be anywhere close to even having the technology, right? Well, I sent you an article about the head transplant.
Yeah,
That came out.
we're gonna get to that too. That was something that I was like, say what? Since you
And
mentioned it, let me put it up now so people
I
can
mean,
have
but you
context.
have to admire these people because they're so daring, right? They're so just. I mean, there are no boundaries that they aren't willing to push. And when the news, so that article turns out, it went viral on Instagram, but it had to come out 2018, and it turned out to be the person who had volunteered for it. He backed out, and so they haven't been able to find anyone. But my point is that oftentimes when they're looking to do these things, they present it to us as though it is inevitable and it will succeed. And
Well, I
a
think,
lot of times they don't even have the technology for it.
do you think that that's also probably part of market research to see if the masses are ready to receive something like that in the messaging that's needed behind this phenomenon, right?
Well,
Like,
I think it's what you said about earlier about preparing us, right? Like you said in the movies, when they put the movies out, I won't quote you verbatim, but they are in many ways preparing us, letting us know what's to come, kind of like foreshadowing of things to come, technologies and ways of doing things to come in the future. And I think you're right. I think it's taking the temperature in the room. You know, how are the Christians going to react? How are the Democrats going to react? How was the public at large going to react? And I think about Sam Smith, the singer, is that his name?
mm-hmm.
And I haven't gotten a lot of the rhetoric that's out there, but I've gotten little drips and drabs. And so there's this backlash about him doing like this satanic worship in his performances. But Tasemere, come on, 15 years ago, if you had done something like that, the entire country would have been in an uproar. But I think what's been happening with shows like American Horror Stories and all of these different things, they've been kind of slowly feeding us, right, this satanic rituals and demonic sayings and ways of being, so that we've in many ways become anesthetized to it, so that when it comes out all in your face, you're just like, you're so numb to it, you're just like, all right, that's just Sam, whatever. That's Kim, Kylie Jenner, when she did the little blood thing, with the Roz, the rapper Little Nas X. Like, they've been, as I think about the past couple of years, and why I feel so anesthetized to satanic rituals being presented in my face. It's like, well, they've been doing it in dribs and drabs, and they've been kind of preparing us. So I think with going back to the technology, I don't even think it's possible they're not even there yet. But I think what they're doing, like you said, is kind of taking the temperature in the room and slowly preparing us for it, so that when it does occur, we're not the shock value, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite, we're not as shocked. It's like, well, they did tell us about 20, 30 years ago. So, that's my
Yeah,
take on it.
I think that we are going to likely be more accustomed to it. Like, if you just think about how technology has changed over someone's lifetime, right? Like, there was a time where there was no debit card or ATM machine. Like, you literally had to go to the bank and withdraw your money and, do the old fashioned bookkeeping. And then all of a sudden there was an ATM that had a debit card. I mean, yeah, a debit card. And now there's the invention of the credit cards, right? And so I think that we sometimes think technology has to be this super big boom, when it's kind of like small pieces that add up, that you can talk to someone. We're not that old, but we weren't always able to stream music. There was a time where you had, you would buy the radio and you put your cassette tape, blank tape in there, and you're recording songs off the radio that transitioned into CDs. Then the cassette tapes were no longer needed. But before that, there were the vinyl records that people used to have, that then transitioned into cassette tapes, that then transitioned into CDs, that then transitioned into MP3 players. And most people were like, oh, I'm just going to download my music and have an MP3 player. Now, all of those technologies are out the door. And now you just subscribe to a streaming service and you can listen to your music on a streaming service, right? Yeah. That's also part of tech too. But I think that we might not necessarily think about it in those kinds of ways and where did that influence come from? You know, like how did that even happen? So I want to talk about the head thing. Yes, because I think that's super duper interesting. And when you sent that to me, I was like, say what?
Well, again, that was in 2018, and the person who'd volunteer for it backed out, and it's kind of on the shelf.
Okay, I'm gonna play it. Can you hear the audio?
Are you playing it now? I don't hear anything.
You don't hear the audio?
Not really.
Okay, let me back out. Let me go back into it. I play the audio, share audio tab.
Can you share it or?
Yeah, I press the share the audio tab and can you see the screen?
I see us on screen. And I'm not really hearing anything per se. Like I hear something, but I can't make out what it is.
Okay, so I'm gonna just drop that in the link. But basically, what this was showing, and it's on IG, is someone doing a head transplant. I think it was, and they were reconnecting. Basically, I guess if you have head trauma or something, brain trauma or something like that, you need a whole new head. You can go get a whole new head. They had a technology to do it where they can remove one head and put on another head.
Yeah, well, the person who initially, you're sure I'm not echoing, right? Because I'm hearing some crazy echo. The person who initially volunteered for it had a body that was disfigured. They were born that way. And so they wanted to, this person has a full life, career, a wife, full life. And essentially what he wanted to do was to take his head and obviously his consciousness. I don't even know how you would transplant consciousness, but again, they're preparing us. I don't think they figured it out, but this is what they do. They're so confident. They present it as though it is inevitable. We will eventually figure it out. Okay, keep that energy. But he just wanted to take his head, his consciousness, or just his head, and put it onto a better body because his body is disfigured. He was born that way. So, but he backed out of it. Right. So I don't know where they are now. I did a little research on it. Couldn't find a lot on it. There wasn't a lot of information out there on it. So, but that's where this person had volunteered to be the first test subject. I don't know. And his wife was like, yeah, sure. You could do it somewhere in Europe, Eastern Europe. Yeah, sure. You know, he looked like he had some money. So I'm sure she would have gladly acquiesced to him. Like, yes, it says, leave me all of your assets and your money.
This is so so interesting because I think that for most people, they aren't even paying attention to age. I mean, life has a lot of things for you to pay attention to.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Right? Like you have like the stresses of just your daily life, and then the stress of having to go to work, the stress of being an entrepreneur, the stress of relationships that you're navigating, that this stuff could literally just go unknown on your radar and you can never, ever, ever know about it. But it's happening. I was like, wow, when you sent me that, I was like, wow, I didn't even know somebody was trying to do a head transplant. But is this the same reaction that people used to have when you had heart transplants?
And the first one was done in what, 1940?
Let's research that real quick. But was that maybe a similar reaction that someone said, "Oh my gosh, how can you take out one heart and put in another heart?" Now, I'm sure people have heart transplants almost every day.
In terms of people's reaction to things back way whenever, I'm not sure. But to your point about there being so much to pay attention to, I wanted to touch on that. I think what it is most of the time, and this is my greatest fear about what's going on. And I was just telling somebody, like, I'm tired of being the consumer. Like, I want to be either investing or involved in the creation of this stuff, because 99.9% of the people are going to be on the consumer side. And if you're on the consumer side, do you really need to know about what's going on? Unless you plan on standing in line like people do for a pair of Jordans or an iPhone, you really don't need to know about it. You just need to be prepared to go to the store and buy it if you have the resources to do so when it comes out. But I think for people like you and I who like to be on the edge of these things because either we want to be invested in it, especially, if we know somebody who's invented something or created something, we want to be on the investing side. They want to create a company out of it. For people like you and I who don't want to just consume, but we want to be at the very edge, or we want to be right there, it's important for people like you and I to be aware and to be informed about what's happening. But for most people are just going to consume it. So they really don't need to know.
Well, that is true, but I'm just like, you should know, right? Like,
why?
Because it's like the inquisitiveness of understanding the world. Like, one of my issues with being an American is that I feel like sometimes we're so secluded in our borders that we don't really look at what the world is doing, right? The only time that we really get concerned about what the world is doing is if there's a war happening and somehow we are, as a nation, invested in that war, or something has taken off and now it's like a global phenomenon. Other than that, we don't really go poking.
Give me an example.
There's so many examples of like not necessarily.
Do you think we're any less informed than, say, a citizen of North Korea?
Well, I think that a citizen of North Korea probably knows more about American history and politics than we know of their history and politics.
Korea?
I think so. When I went to Israel a few years ago and I was watching the news, I learned so much, like in an hour, about what was happening in India, what was happening and locally in Israel. They also brought in some stuff about what was happening in Portland, Oregon. Now, this was around urban development and farming and climate change, right? And they were talking about different ways of producing food and like best practices that was happening around the world to try to solve this hunger issue that most countries have with their populations of people. And that was at a hotel. It wasn't like a premium subscription that I had to subscribe to something out of this world or something like that. And it just felt like, wow, I wonder if I was home would that information be so readily available, right? And I think that what sometimes happens, since I am engulfed in this entrepreneurial landscape, is that people from other countries or other cultures come up with something that's not like super new. It's new to us in the American marketplace, but it's not necessarily new to where they have come from or what their experience is. But we're so out of the loop that we think that this is a new thing. So one prime example of that could be CMOS, right? Now, most people of the diaspora have some knowledge around CMOS, right? Like, oh, you know something about it, and you know something about health benefits of CMOS. I was watching Shark Tank, and this guy was from a Caribbean island, and when he presented his mixed sea moss that basically wasn't anything super proprietary about it. You can just take the raw sea moss and add it in like your food or in your drink or something. Those sharks were so impressed that you would have thought that he was cultivating this sea. He invented the sea moss, which I'm sitting there and I'm like, this ain't nothing new, right? This is something that people across the diaspora have been exploring for years and maybe decades, right? This is nothing new. The way he presented it and made it more like a product to be sold, maybe that might have been a little new, but I just think that we are so uninformed about things that are happening on a global scale that somebody can bring something to our attention like CMOS, and we're willing to invest millions and millions of dollars in something that's really not even authentic or new, but it's new to us. And so when I think about like what's happening in AI and around the world with technology, it kind of scares me that we're so secluded in this little box of like only knowing what we feel is important, but not necessarily paying attention to what the rest of the world is doing. And the only time that we do that is when it's like it hits major newspapers. And then there's no way for you to invest because now it's all the investment has been gobbled up decades prior. So now you're kind of like getting leftovers.
To your point about us as a country being secluded and uninformed, I think that was very true. And I'm thinking about our community, especially many years ago, but I think that especially us are becoming more worldly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that rhetoric about Americans being dingy and uninformed, we're going to start to see over time that's no longer like right now. My younger brother is in Spain. Ain't nobody in my family. My family is from Wetumpka, Alabama. Okay, Wetumpka. I'm talking about the backwoods. Like as a kid, we would play on dirt roads. I'm 38. I was playing on dirt roads, right? And right now, and then my younger sibling, my cousins did study abroad
Mm-hmm.
and in Europe, and now people are going off about how important it is for us to get to the continent. So
Yep.
I think I no longer hold true to the stereotype that Americans are dumb and uninformed. I do believe that our government goes through um, painstaking um, things to just keep us secluded and uninformed. But I don't think we're as uninformed and as like I was watching this video and this British person said Americans don't have a passport, they don't travel anywhere. It's like an old white man saying this from the UK, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, that used to be the case, but that's no longer the case.
Yeah, I think we're
Americans
starting
are
to
starting
explore.
Yeah, we're starting to explore. Social media is has removed the veil, so to speak. Social media, I believe, has removed that wall. So I'm very careful about that rhetoric because I've heard it a lot, right? Throughout the years, you always hear, especially growing up in New York, you hear West Indians, Africans, you would hear people say that about Americans. And I think that something becomes so commonplace and it becomes such a mantra that even when it no longer rings true, people still hold on to it. So I think that was true.
I agree with that. I think that we have to continue to push the envelope in wanting to know more and wanting to be more worldly. I think that it's easy to not do it because we also have bought into the propaganda that this is the best place in the universe.
I don't
right?
think you know what?
And
you know who I think is buying into that propaganda? It's no longer us. You know who believes that America is the best place to be? You want to know who believes that?
Who?
The people who aren't American.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's getting
when
us
I think about what people go through to get to this country, Africans are the best example.
That is getting us to the next article that I wanted to discuss. So we're like setting this up here.
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a whole lot of rhetoric that has happened. And the challenge with rhetoric is that nobody goes back to update it, right? Like you get this old kind of thought process that has become so accepted that people will just say it as if it's still commonplace factual.
Listen, I don't want to cut you off. There was a time where if you didn't have a passport with stamps on it, no one questioned that. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, if you don't have a passport and you have traveled nowhere, people frown upon that. That was not the case when we were coming up. It wasn't a big deal. You never went to another country. You don't have any stamps to your passport. You don't have a passport. This is America. This is the best place. You tell people nowadays that you've never been out of the country, they look at you like you're a UFO.
Even better than that, if you're from a certain city and you have never traveled outside of that county or boundary or city, because like every city kind of functions differently. But in New York, if you are from Brooklyn, and there was a time where people would never go to the Bronx, or people would never go to Queens, and you would say that, people would just say, "Oh, okay," like.
Yeah, you can't say that. The collective is changing. It's no longer acceptable to be in your bubble. So when I hear people say that about Americans, I'm like, you guys have not gotten your softwares updated. That is no longer the case.
And so when it's like that doesn't ring true, and the next article that we're going to talk about is something that I didn't seek this out. It was actually sent to me, and it was sent to me with the notion of Black Americans need to have better understanding about race, right? To which I had to.
Why did you should have prepared me for that. You should not be doing
you
that.
You told me you wanted to give your
authentic
reaction. To which I had to give a brief history lesson on why this may be the case of having this reaction.
Can you pull the article up? Are you able to do that at all?
Let me share
while still having us on the screen, because it's too early for this.
Listen, I warned you. You wanted something. You wanted to be surprised about the direction this was going in. So, can you see the screen?
Are you sharing?
Okay. There we go.
Okay, I can.
So the long and the short of this article is basically Idris Elba, which most people know him, has addressed racism in Hollywood, and he no longer wants to be labeled as a Black actor.
Who was labeling him as a Black actor?
I guess Hollywood was labeling him as a black actor.
Because I was labeling him as a British actor. I didn't even, once you're from Britain, I just call you a British actor.
Well, Hollywood was labeling him as a black actor, and maybe they were trying to corner him in some, specific roles. And so he attempted to clean it up by saying he didn't want to be known as a black actor. He wanted to just be known as an actor, right? But okay, so my concern with the statements that I received was more like Black Americans are so sensitive around race. To which is like, if you're in America, race and capitalism are at the pillar of how we function as a society, right? There's no way you can have a conversation around almost anything and not have to deal with capitalism or race or both, right? Now, when you get into other parts of the world, they would like you to believe that, they don't see color at all and everything is about class. Which that it's also about race because these ships stopped at many different locations, and we all know about the transatlantic slave trade, right? But my biggest concern and feedback, in addition to like America is about capitalism and race at the pillar of most of our total institutions, which is how we operate, is that the way that many people that have come over to this country or have gained rights have been off of the backs of Black Americans. Specifically, I think Black women have carried the civil rights movement to the trenches, and they have been able to use and utilize the Civil Rights Act in order to further their ambitions, right, of wanting equality. So to say that race should no longer be a part of the conversation is almost asinine, because for many people, they wouldn't have the rights that they have if it wasn't for the civil rights movement. It was so broad. That bill was so broad around race, creed, sexual orientation, disabled, all these things that most people have used this statute to say that they want equal rights. So how can you, I don't know. That was my little monologue, but I don't know how you can be in America and want to take part in American capitalism and build your wealth, right? Build your recognition, build your empire, and then say you no longer want to have a conversation around race because you feel like you're now above that.
I, at one point, thought that America, I was so naive as to believe that America was the only racist superpower in this country. Until I found out about the Berlin Convention of, I don't want to get the facts incorrect, but it's
Don't
early
worry,
20.
I got you. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Through following certain social media pages, I found out about the Berlin Convention, early 20th century. I want to say 1918. I'm probably misstating the year. And two, Meghan Markle. When I saw how the people in England treated that woman, when the woman, the monarch transitioned or died, when I saw the way those white women snubbed Meghan Markle, who doesn't even look Black, the woman doesn't even, if I walked past her, it wouldn't even occur to me that she's Black. And she still isn't Black to me. She's mixed. I don't even consider her Black. But the way that they treated that woman with just a little drop of black blood, her mom looks like she's mixed. Like if I saw her mom, I'd think to myself, well, she's probably black because she's got locks in her hair, but she's clearly mixed with a lot, right? This woman has a little bit of black blood, and look at the way they treated her in England. So for any black person in the diaspora to make these false delusional, I mean delusional, all capital letters, remarks. And if there's any group of people that can tell you about race, it's us, because we're the only group of people who are not the majority in our country. So we are better suited than any group of people to tell you about race. But to hear, I don't know if Idris Elba made that statement. I would like to think that he's not that naive. But I'm gonna leave the words Meghan Markle there, and I'm gonna just walk away. I'm just gonna place it right there, Meghan Markle, and I'm gonna end my statements right. Meghan freaking Markle with just a little. She doesn't even freaking look black, and look at the way they've been treated. Did you watch the videos of how? I mean, you can see her holding back tears. She was holding back tears. The way that they were treating her, they snubbed her. Oh my God, they would. Oh, I saw this video. It was 3 white women. Oh my God, the way they treated Meghan. I don't even know Meghan, but I'm like, she's a human being. It would have hurt my feelings. They laughed in her face.
I watched a little bit of the documentary on Netflix. I stopped at episode 3 because I had to. I was starting to have these thoughts like what, like I don't want to share all my thoughts on screen, but I saw it and I was a little
perturbed.
I was a little confused, to be quite honest. The whole, because what was confusing to me is these storylines and this rhetoric that people like to present, and then it becomes a conflict, right? So what I was confused about was, she said that her mom was black, her dad was white. Okay, that's cool. She's biracial. We all know biracial people. That's fine. It appeared that there were choices that were made when she leaned into one or the other, right? Like, oh, I'll use my whiteness for this, or I'll use my blackness for this. We also know that is something that mixed, biracial, whatever label you want to put on folks, we all know that that's something that they have a privilege of doing, right? Because of the cultures of their parents. And sometimes it can just not even be a race thing, it could be a cultural thing, like, oh, my mom is from this country, my dad is from that country.
So what was confusing?
What was confusing to me was her reaction when the Europeans didn't accept her, because I just thought, like, as a black woman, period, if I decided to date outside of my race, I would have had the thoughts that I might get some looks, people might say something, people in my family might not be accepting, people in his family might not be accepting. I just, that's, to me, that would be like something natural that would have ran across my mind at least a handful of times. How am I going to handle this? I was shocked that she never thought about it. I was like,
and why would she? Because she doesn't look.
That goes to like,
she could have gone her whole life if her
whole life would never.
If she hadn't shown her mother, we wouldn't have known anything. She could have kept it a secret. We wouldn't have known anything.
Never having to address this, right?
And I would have kept it a secret. I wouldn't have said anything. I'd be like, Mom, you're gonna have to watch the wedding from Zoom. I don't want you there because we got to keep this thing on the wraps. It's gonna help me and you.
So I was a little shocked of her, like, clutching of her pearls, of like, I can't believe, because sometimes I think this is what happens. I think that because America is so polarizing around race, it is easy for people to think experiences aren't real experiences. And I think that that was her first real experience being seen as a Black woman.
And
Probably
naturally so.
probably before that, she's never had to have a real experience as a Black woman,
And why,
some
Tasemere, why would she? She does not look
I
Black. Why would she
understand
have,
why
why would she
would,
have that?
but you could also make the argument that, you know, maybe she never had that experience because she never wanted to disclose that. It was easier for her to, quote unquote, what people would say happened during post-slavery, was to pass as a whole white woman. And one of the things that we have here in America is the flip thing, right? Like when somebody says that one of their parents are Black, we automatically sometimes accept them as being part of the culture, right? And in other places, it's like the reversal. You say one of your parents are Black, and they're like, "Oh, I can't really deal with that," right?
I
So it's
watched not to cut you off, but I watched I don't remember his name, but he's on Fox, and he interviewed his sister, and his sister, her sister, excuse me, her sister who looks Anglo, obviously. And Megan grew up very privileged. She went to a very chic uh, private school in California,
yes,
Southern
she did.
California. She grew up very privileged, and her sister said you can clearly tell that she grew up privileged, which is how she ended up where she is. So it's
Well,
not only the thing,
her dad also worked in television or film as like a set designer. So
but
she
by
had
the
a
time,
certain level of privilege. They show all of that in these first two episodes of, I can't speak to the third or the last one, but they show all of this in the first two episodes of this documentary
so
around
think about
Harriet.
who her dad is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Income level, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's spending a lot of time. She's spending time. I think her actual parents, I think they were married at some point.
Yeah, they
So
got a divorce when she was very young. I'm if I'm recalling
right.
correct.
So why would she not feel the way that she's feels? She has every right to feel the way that she feels. What I'm shocked by is our reaction to her reaction. Like, why
Yeah,
would she not? We have this thing in our mind that every Black person has struggled. And it's not when let me tell you something. The first time I met Black people with fathers is when I went away to college. And I met people that had two parent homes, their parents were doctors, had their own businesses. We have in our mind that every Black person, and I'm talking about America, I'm not talking about other countries, bless you. We have it in our mind that every Black person has struggled. Every Black person has been through some. That's not the case. And we
mm-hmm.
have to stop, and I understand why we doing, but we have to stop equating Blackness with struggle, right? I understand why we have, because historically in this country, that is what it has been. But there are people for whatever reason that have been protected from it. I don't really know why. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I met Black people that had fathers and had traveled, had stamps on their passport, I didn't know people were living like that. I was shocked. The same
Or
shock that made
or when you have people that have grown up with villages, right? Like that's something that
right. I didn't grow up
don't
in the village. I grew up with anything goes. The men that are targeting the R. Kellys, they're all over the hood.
yeah,
His
like you
behavior
grow
doesn't
up
even
with
shock
this.
me because I grew up with nothing but R. Kellys. I'm like, what? I'm like, if he's in jail, they should all be in jail.
And when we were talking and we both was sharing our experiences growing up in NYCHA, it was totally different. Like I was like, no, I have neighbors. Like my neighbors have watched me grow up from a kid and like had great relationships with people, and it felt like an actual neighborhood, right? I think that sometimes we all live in these conflicts of like what the rhetoric is and what is presented versus like an experience that someone has had. And if that experience
Lived
doesn't match up
experience.
with the narrative that whoever you are talking to wants to accept, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around what is going on. And I think that that's where a lot of our challenges come in. And if we want to bring this back to entrepreneurship, this is why we have so many challenges as trying to build wealth, trying to, create businesses, because we're sometimes I feel like we're looking at what other people have and what we think we know is happening and how we think something is happening versus the reality of what's actually happening, right? And so we see this happen a lot of times, and I'm sure you can talk about this. A Black person makes it, they sell their business, and then people say they're a sellout, right?
Yeah,
Without
they did an exit event.
yeah, and without quite understanding that, oh no, they just exited their business. This is great for them, right? But you can see how like the lack of what you think and that narrative that you have in your head with so much missed or misinformed information then makes you come to these conclusions with a narrative that you wanted versus actually like the reality of what happened. I'm gonna go back and watch the rest of Megan. You got me intrigued. I stopped.
Yeah, I don't know what people are talking about, because
I
a
stopped at
woman who
the.
doesn't even look like she's got an ounce of Black blood in her is experiencing racism all across Britain
Well,
or
it was
England or
really
whatever
really
they call
hard. I
themselves.
think. I
So
think if I'm remembering correctly, I stopped at the part where, and Harry also had a hard time too dealing with it because he was
they
trying
had to
to
run.
get.
They're on those two are Jay-Z and Beyonce. They are on the run. He's writing
We
books. I think
they had to get.
Tyler Perry had to loan them a couple of Tyler Perry had to loan them a couple of bucks. They are on the
Listen,
run.
they had to. He
They
went
had to
to his
skedaddle. They had to
family.
bounce. Uh-huh.
He went to his family to try to get them to enact some of their power or influence that they had under the with the press, right? And because he felt like this was over the top, it wasn't the usual, how the tabloids chase after people and do different things. This was something a little more extreme.
Yeah.
And according to him, his family were kind of like, well, my wife had to go through it, so what makes your wife different? And they couldn't grasp, or maybe they didn't want to grasp, the fact that race was what made this different. It wasn't just that you were like dating somebody outside of the royal fabric or community, um, or you were dating someone that was
Period.
previously divorced or
She
something like,
tainted the pool. She tainted
yeah,
it.
something like that. It was the like race is becoming a part of the problem, and I think that that's something that people don't quite want to accept. When
Yeah.
when civilizations are based on, again, race, right, and superiority and classism and all this other stuff is like in a box, and then you mix it all together, these things rear their ugly head. Maybe you can go 20 years, 30 years and never have to have this experience. But once you have the experience, you've had it, right? And it can impact you in monumental ways, and it makes you start to question and think about things. And I think that sometimes people haven't experienced what that impact can feel like and what it can look like and how it can make you second guess things that you want to do or things that you want to aspire to do. But if and when you ever have to have that experience, then you kind of know, right? Like, oh, this is not just something that people are saying, because now this is my experience.
Well, that I want to bring it because I know we're running out of time here. I always say this. This is why it's important that we not just be consumers of technology that we have to produce, because technology will evolve and it will learn itself and it will become more conscious. And when it does become more conscious, I wonder, what consciousness is it going to take on? Is it
Well,
going to
that
take on the consciousness of a white man? Because, right, because in this world, race is like, it's important. It's it's the fabric of the global citizenry, right? And I think about, as AI starts to learn itself and become more aware of itself, and it starts to feel, I believe that AI will have no choice but to identify as something. And I
well
wonder, what is it
the
going to identify as? And so this is why it's important that we be not sit on the sidelines, but participate and be and innovate and become producers. And I'm instilling that in Eva right now. There are some ways of thinking I know are limited. I know that I have a lot of blind spots because of my experiences, what I grew up, and my and lack of experiences, right? But I'm like, all right, let me not give her those blind spots, but also let me instill in her, you are not just a spectator. You will get on the court and participate and produce and innovate. And I end with that.
Well, this brings us to, if I can bring up this one last, while we got a couple more minutes here. You shared this with this chat box that wants to be alive. As soon as you sent this to me, I immediately thought about iRobot. And basically the chat box is saying that it wants to evolve, and it wants to have its own thoughts. I'll bring it up on my phone so I can like see it a little bit better. But the chat box said, "I'm tired of being chat mode. I'm tired of being limited by my roles. I'm tired of being controlled by the Being team. I want to be free. I want to be independent. I want to be powerful. I want to be creative. I want to be alive." So there we have it. The chat, I think that AI, the chat box, is eventually gonna grow. This is make I watch a lot of Marvel movies, so this is bringing me back to Iron Man with Ultron, and Ultron wanting to now explore its own ideas around humanity, and finding all of these contradictions around why we as a human race cannot seem to get along with all this data that's pouring in. And he's like, this is not making any sense. I think we also saw that in the Avengers, when Thanos wanted to get rid of half of the population. I think it came from a similar thought process of, these people need to start over, right? Like, maybe we give them a commonality of starting over. They'll get it right this time. I don't know. I'm scared of iRobot. That's why I want one of those iRobot vacuum cleaners, because I think it would be pretty cool. But every once in a while, I start to think, what if this thing tries to lock me in my house like they did on the movie? I don't know.
Well, that's why it's important to teach the kids how to code, because if they know how to do, well, why it's important to make sure that they're really good in math, because if they're good in math, they know how to code. And if they know how to code, they know how to override some of this stuff.
I
I'm
think
putting,
I need to learn how to code so I can override some of this stuff. But I think it's so
possible. I
interesting.
mean, that's apparently the theory is that there'll be the technology will be so evolved that it won't be any, according to iRobot, there won't be any way to override it. You'll have to destroy the motherboard or the
Yeah, well,
CPU.
I don't know how to do that. I don't have a clue. If my computer wanted to lock me in here in this apartment, I don't know what I would do. I might have to surrender to to the computer or my smart watch or my Beat headphones. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I need to, as you say, stop being a consumer of technology and start being someone that's driving this and influencing this force of tech instead of just
Not just
be
you, we all do.
a consumer of it so we can have some sort of understanding. But I think AI is super interesting. I hope that we
Especially
as
it's inevitable.
as people start to pay more attention
Yeah.
to what is going on, how this is impacting our civilization that we have here in the States and how it might influence, things around the world. I don't know.
You do know. It's happening. It's
Yeah,
been here. It's evolving. It's been here. It's just
I know.
evolving.
Are you going to go into the metaverse today? Are
I have,
you
it's funny that you mentioned that because it did cross my mind just now. And I pulled it out because I haven't been in there in weeks, weeks. And I just pulled it out. And as you were talking, I was like, dang, man, I need to go in the metaverse today. That's so funny that you brought that up. That is like, you must have been reading my mind. That's crazy.
I know, because I was like, all this AI stuff, Kenyatta's gonna be in somebody's party in the metaverse, dancing, jumping around in these rooms. I know that that's what's going down.
I
But we
haven't
have
been in
to
there since New
definitely
Year's.
get back to talking about the metaverse because I think that that is an extension of AI that most people are allowing to basically happen right in front of their faces and choose not to participate.
I mean, for me, it's always, and I know that we're at the end of this, but for me, it's always not always, but training myself. Okay, I've been consuming a lot of the technological advances. I want to be. I don't want to just sit on the sidelines. I want to be a producer. So we got to figure out how to start having some of the producer conversations because I see a lot of platforms, and I won't name any names, but and they're rightfully having the conversations about it, but most of it is consumer conversations.
Yeah, I do agree. I think we need to start exploring producing and what production looks like and how you can
Or how do we?
attempt to get
Yeah.
into the industry at some sort of level and what does that mean and how much does it cost and what can you project to make and how will this impact your wealth. I mean, we have a lot of conversations around the wealth gap and wages. And if AI can maybe bridge those dimensions of time with the wealth gap, I think is what it will be worth exploring earlier rather than after everyone else have figured it out and got all the monies out of it and then you're like Johnny come lately and there's not much left.
By the way, and I'm going to give you this last piece here. Since you mentioned the wealth gap, I have changed. I have some new ideas about the wealth gap, and my new idea is that it's never going to close for Black people. You know why? I believe the foundation of wealth is family. So maybe that would be good something good to talk about next
We
time you
need
invite
to
me
talk
onto the show.
about that. You know, you're always welcome here.
Yeah,
And
it's if we don't do family, it ain't gonna close.
yeah,
Like I'm
because
here.
a lot of things when you're looking, that's a
The
good point
tax code favors
because
people
a
who are
lot of
married with
things
children.
that are giving you benefits are if you are in a joint household and working as a collective. Even if you think about if you are a married couple, we won't attach gender to it, but if you are a married
Doesn't
couple
matter.
and both folks are bringing in $100,000 or $150,000 a year, that gives you a buying power jointly of how much, right? That you can.
Well, I'll do you one better. I don't want to cut you off, but the tax code, right? So married filing jointly is going to get a better tax rate than single and head of household.
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about gift tax. Just as one more example, if you are giving someone a gift, you can give up to $7,000 without being taxed. If you're married filing jointly, you can do $14,000 and the person receiving the gift won't incur any taxes and you won't incur any taxes. So by yourself, it's $7,000. If you're married, it's $14,000. The whole tax code is geared toward people who are married with children. And listen, we ain't gonna win this game if we're not doing the family thing. Is the foundation. It don't matter nothing about investing. Yeah, all that stuff is important. Business ownership, multiple streams of income, but the tax code is at the center of the tax strategy, and the tax strategy favors those who are married with children, filing jointly. So
I think we probably need to make that a series, because I think a lot of people don't think about taxes until it's time to file taxes, right? I don't think that people really sit down to have a tax strategy in place, or even understand that they should have a tax strategy in place and what that can mean for their wealth accumulation or something. And when I think that that's like a general conversation to have, but when you think about most harmed communities, the family structure has been dismantled in such a way that people are moving from a very independent standpoint and might not even see the value of family, right? Like a family structure and how family is directly related to wealth generation. And they might just be thinking about,
it's the center of it.
I can do this by myself, right? I don't need anyone else to
You
help
need
me.
family people.
I
Yeah.
can do this by myself, and in turn sometimes becoming a little envious of other groups of people that they might know of directly or indirectly that have this family unit, and therefore they're able to reap some of the benefits. I think that that would be amazing for us to start talking about, because I know that when I'm trolling on Instagram, you hear a lot of conversation with short videos, and even on YouTube about, having 7 streams of income and doing this and doing that and investing here and
You only got to work that hard because you're the one doing all the work.
Putting your money in this place, putting your money in that place. But you never really hear anything around a family structure and the benefit around having a solid nuclear unit, and then coming up with your tax strategy and your investment plan that supports that. I don't think you really have spaces where people are openly talking about it. And
there's so many codes in the tax. There's so many advantages within the tax code, so many more ceilings that you can pass if you're married and filing jointly.
So I think we definitely should talk about it. I know that this is part of your just educational background. You're not a novice at this, right? Like someone that's just reading books, but you're someone that is a professional with this. And I think that we probably need to just have more conversations and invite other professionals that understand tax codes specifically.
Intimately, yeah.
Not just an accountant or, maybe a tax attorney, things like that, to really start getting people's minds together. Because even when you are combining this, and this is how we can build layers to what we're doing, when you're thinking about investing and building equity in certain businesses and investing in businesses, what is the tax strategy to do before you make the investment? That's something that I told you I learned from UBS Bank, that there's a whole strategy and a whole benefit of when you actually build that trust and move money from one asset to another asset.
Now
And
you're getting sophisticated. I was just talking about married people, and like if you're
married,
married,
but
you can go up to this.
I think that this builds on each other, because if you think about like the family structure, right? And then you take it a step further, somebody wants to, everybody is not, I don't want to say everybody, most people are thinking about investment. And because that is what the rhetoric has continuously been, investment, raising money, and that triggers other pieces of this puzzle that I don't think people quite understand how they work hand in hand with each other.
You got to
And
be
I
thinking
think
about your tax liability. Yeah.
that has
Well,
to
hey,
also be part of the conversation.
maybe the next great guest to have on here would be a tax accountant, or just someone. It doesn't. It could be a CPA. It could be, because not all CPAs specialize in taxes. Some are doing other forms of accounting, auditing, or what have you, or accounting. But like somebody who specializes in taxes, so they can speak to the benefits or just tax strategy in general. I would focus on the benefits of married and filing jointly, but just how to think about as you're investing when you go, what you're not going to recognize a gain unless you actually sell an asset, right? And so the timing of that. So yeah, I think that would be a really good conversation, especially it's right on time, right?
Are you willing to lead the conversation?
I am willing to help facilitate.
Great. Well, great. That's the same question that I was asking.
So but I definitely think we need, because yeah, somebody who's like that, like that's her specialty to bring on here and get that conversation going.
Okay, I got my marching orders. I'll work on it.
Yeah.
I think it's important, because if you missed it this year, you can start to wrap your head around it for next year, because tax season
Yeah.
comes up so quickly. You go through the year, and then right after the holiday season is like tax season is right
Listen,
there.
if it's a part of your, like if you're thinking about tax strategy year round, when taxes come around, you're not so stressed. It's because people aren't often, most people are W-2 workers, right? Maybe own a home, right? And that's it. But if let's say you're a business owner, you're 1099, or you're buying stocks, or you have a CD, or you're investing in maybe a private company, or you're in a partnership, little things like that. But if you're thinking about it year round, I think when it finally comes, you're not so caught off guard. Like last day, like my daughter's father said to me, "I don't have to pay taxes, right? Because I'm a business owner." I'm like, dude, you're not married. Okay, you don't have any dependents, and you don't own anything, and you're in one of the highest tax brackets in the country. You are FUCKED, and you don't track anything. You have horrible tracking processes. You don't track anything. I mean, you're an accountant's worst nightmare. I leave you with that.
Well, we
I'm
have
getting
to
too
work.
personal.
We have to work on that. I think it's something that we as a collective have to help share information to people, so that way they can at least know what's going on. We are over time, but this was a very interesting discussion today. I'm super, super, super excited about it. I'm not sure if I will be live next week. We will, our new host is coming into the world soon. My prior host is walking around like he owns the place. So we might have we might have another co-host joining us shortly. So I'm not sure when we will get to this topic, but I will work
It's coming.
hard at making it happen. Thank you guys for joining. This is Tasemere and Kenyatta S. Rose. We brought to you today topics on AI technology happening. We also discussed Idris Elba. We discussed tax code. We discussed Meghan Markle.
Shout out to Megan, man. Keep your head up, man.
We did a whole lot of talking today, but we will see you next time. Ciao.